Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to the Finding Hope podcast. Today, I've got Jason Gady with
Hello.
us, and Will is in Malawi or in Johannesburg or somewhere on the other side of the world. He should be coming back on Thursday, I think. But I hope you are well. Got some snow on the ground for the first time in 2025, and it's a little cold outside. But we are back in the book of Romans, chapter 7, right in the dead center of chapter 7. Went through about 7 verses on Sunday, and the title of the message was By No Means. And the reason that was titled that way is because it's about the third or fourth time Paul has said that. He is arguing with an invisible antagonist and keeps asking the same questions. If the law is this, then we're okay to do this. And he says, by no means. So, Jason, you met with the men this morning. What did you guys get out of some things? You got some things to go over.
Yeah, I do. I wanted to read this. I made a couple of notes
Okay.
as we went through it with the men, and also beforehand after hearing the sermon. And I wrote this. So who is Paul writing to, and who is he arguing with? And you had stated that you believe that it is Paul debating his old self, Saul. How many times do we find ourselves in conflict with our old selves, old attitudes, old habits? Are we capable of ripping that old man off the cross only to wear those clothes again? And the encouragement that we gleaned out of this as men in this morning's meeting was, when you find yourself returning to some of those old things, understand that you are not alone. You are not the only person. You are not isolated in this. So if you think about it, Paul was struggling with this, and as we know, when he goes on to the very verses that are next,
Yes.
so verse 15, he's
Yes.
going to say, well, let me tell you exactly how I struggle with this.
Yeah.
And I know this seems to be a strange word to use, but it's almost refreshing when you say, but I struggle and I have a unique struggle. And when you actually learn that I'm not alone in this,
Yeah.
we struggle together. So that was one of the big takeaways from this morning.
Yeah, the thing that's amazing about Paul, and I think if someone were to ask me, maybe another pastor or something were to ask me, how do you preach the book of Romans? Like, give me some tips and pointers on teaching the book of Romans. I would say, before you teach the book of Romans, teach the book of Acts. Because I didn't realize the just incredible correlation between getting to know Paul and then getting to understand what Paul's saying. But there was such a good foundation of actually getting to know this man's heart through the book of Acts and what he went through in his conversion all the way to the end of his life, and then to really read and dig into what he's now saying, and to know him as a person before you know what he's saying, it changes the whole dynamic of the thing. It really does for me. But one of the things that is really incredible about Paul, Steve Jobs said this a long time ago, is that we all are creatures of habit, and we get into grooves, like grooves in a record. The great ones can jump grooves. They can get out of this old behavior, this old man, and they can look at new processes. I remember he pulled a device out and he said, "We're going to put 1,000 songs in your pocket." And even his own engineers were like, "You're insane. That's not possible." And he says, "Not only that, you can get to any song in 4 clicks." And they're like, you're warping reality here. You're just not going to be able to do this. And so that's when they came up with the scroll wheel. You remember the wheel?
Oh, yeah.
And he looked at it, and I remember he because I read his biography, and he said, I looked at it and I said, you cheated, but I'll accept it. But the thing about Paul is to completely abandon the old, not just the old self, but the entire way of thinking about the law, and then to go back and remember who he was. And I think that's why I believe this, is because he's going back and he's remembering who he was and what that old self had held to for so long and was so dogmatic about, to the point where I'm going to kill people over. And now I've got to talk to this man and say, look, the law is righteous. The law is holy. The law is good, but it never did anything to save me. So that's pretty incredible, you know.
Well, you mentioned in the sermon, and I really like this part because I felt this way forever about this particular spot in Romans. You said that it was the hardest passage in the chapters 5, 6, and 7. And so I went on to write that the hardest verse in arguably the hardest chapters of arguably, I understand
Yep.
arguably, the hardest book.
Yeah.
So I attempted to summarize. So this is the fifth sermon on sin.
Sin.
So all right.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I attempted to summarize, and I would love to hear your summary. So because we've just walked through 5 sermons.
Yeah.
So I summarized and said, we are free from the law because of the grace provided by our faith in Christ. But because of our love for Jesus, our sanctification leads to the elimination of sin in our lives. Because we love him, we want to be more like him.
Yes.
So, I mean, how do you go through 5 weeks? So I teased the men this morning and said, we've been in sin for a month.
Yeah.
And they said, don't use that on the podcast. That's not the right way to say it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we've been studying sin
Yes.
for 5 sermons now. I mean, how do you summarize what Paul is trying to say in these last 5?
The funny thing, well, I don't. It took Paul 3 chapters to summarize what he has to say about sin. So to summarize it any more than that, which Paul is pretty long-winded, I think the thing that I would say is to sin is to miss the mark. And that is such a broad term that I don't know if any of us can actually define what missing the mark is at all times. The Holy Spirit is really the only thing in your life that can tell you, hey, you're missing the mark. Are you listening to him, or are you disobeying or ignoring? So I say all that to say this. Sin is merely to miss the mark, and every person every day misses the mark. Thank God we have Jesus.
Amen.
That's about as summary as I can get it. You know?
Amen. I think about that when Paul spends this much time on a topic.
Yeah.
I guess it just exemplifies how much we struggle with this topic. Otherwise, why would he spend the time? Why would he lead us? And as we talked about, talking about the very next verses that are coming,
Yeah.
I mean, he takes it to a whole different level.
Oh, yeah.
And it's so helpful to me because, again, I kind of go back to the topic of the things that I struggle with, that I'm not alone in them.
Mm-hmm.
And that we can share them as a church. We can share them as life groups. We can share them, thank God for Jesus, obviously, and thank goodness that he has put other people in our lives to share this life with, so we can walk along each other, walk beside each other, and say, I struggle also. We struggle together.
Yes. One of the benefits of going through the book of Romans, and someone has said it was the Magna Carta of the New Testament, I've had a lot of people come up to me and say, I've been in church my whole life for 30 years or a very, very long time, and they never fundamentally understood what grace actually was until we preached it in Romans. That, yes, the record has been cleared, but the fact that there's no more record blew people away. And that is, when you listen to, sometimes I like to listen to, PhDs in evolution just to see how wrong they are. It just gives me a chuckle. But you listen to people who are just lost. They don't know Jesus, and they don't know the extent of the sacrifice that Jesus did for them, and the best they can come up with is, I should just do better. I should probably not lie on my taxes. I should probably just be a better person, and maybe more education and more this. And when you read all of these things about sin, it's like none of that is going to matter in the end. It is only the sacrifice of Jesus. And as we get to chapter 8, that's the culmination of all of these verses where Paul gets to, and he says, where sin came through one man, Adam, and corrupted the whole world, Jesus had to come and counteract that by being perfect and living in a perfect body. I don't want to give too much away, but the thing that staggered me is the only sinless person that has ever existed is Jesus, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Sin resides where? In the body.
Mm-hmm.
If Jesus had no sin and they had not crucified him, would he have lived forever? Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So here's a sinless body, okay, coming in, taking on sin to purify a body that was sinless, but through that body became sin. So now you have one man and corrupted the entire humanity. Mm-hmm. Jesus comes as one man and redeems all of humanity through a sinless body. He couldn't come as glorified Christ. He had to come as a man. And that's staggering when you begin to unveil that whole thing, you know, because there is the mystery of heaven saying you have to take on human form, you have to live sinlessly, you have to go in, and you are now the payment for all the sin that has come before you and will come after you.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
It is unbelievable. One person mentioned that if you take a look at the life of Adam, because originally designed sinless,
Yes.
and then committed sin,
Yeah.
but lived for
900 some years.
900 some years. Why? And it speaks to what you're saying is with Jesus, where would he have stopped?
Right.
And the answer, at least in when you think in terms of Adam, would be he wouldn't have.
He wouldn't have.
There's no reason for it to stop.
Yeah.
So the sacrifice had to be made.
Yes.
Yeah. So let me change topics on us, because you went to, we all desire something new and shiny when it comes along.
Yeah.
So here's what I was thinking about is when we talk about coveting and coveting things, and a lot of people, at least in my discussions with them, it always resides around stuff. So it's covet a car, or covet a house, or a new kitchen. It's stuff. But what's fascinating to me is it can also be about relationships or talents or skills. We can covet having more friends like somebody else has, or we can covet more talent like a coworker, or we can covet skills like a faster serve in pickleball. That was specifically for you.
That was specifically for me.
Yeah, that was specifically for you.
Like, I covet that.
Yeah, well, I'm not saying that. I just threw that out there. But the idea of covet extends to all aspects of our life, and I understand this so clearly because I remember being in manufacturing and in my background, and I would see somebody that displayed clear talents. Maybe it's presentation skills, or maybe it's in the way they were able to make a point that was influencing. And I remember very clearly, especially in my younger years, where I would say, I want to be able to do that. Now, there's a difference in sharpening a skill or a talent. It depends on the path you take to get there.
Right.
So if we introduce the idea of covet being a gateway sin, that allows more sin. You mentioned with David, for example, that sin led to lying, led to murder, led to adultery, led to an absolute mess.
Right.
So if we are coveting other things, I think we can expect, what does that lead to? So maybe expand on that point of saying, if you covet, you can expect this type of thing to happen in your life.
Well, I think at the root of coveting is really a selfish desire, because it's I want is really can sum up coveting. Okay. And every selfish decision leads to loneliness. So when you look at David, for example, the king of Israel, and he coveted Bathsheba, when you see the result of that, God tells David, the sword will never leave your house. And then you look at Absalom, his son, who basically tried to take the kingdom, threw him out of the palace, slept with all of his concubines in public. I mean, did some horrific things, and isolated him, really. he was walking on the road and some guy was cursing him and throwing rocks at him, and his general was like, "Let me go cut his head off," and he said, "No, I deserve this," you know. It isolated David. It led to loneliness. It led to all of these things, and so the comparison trap, at least in my life, because I think we all can fall into this, like you were talking about. Man, I wish I had his ability, or I wish I had his position or her position, or whatever that is. The comparison trap leads to a place where you're disgruntled with where you are, and you're always longing for what other people have or what other people can do, instead of what you just said. I think the statistic is it takes 10,000 hours to be a master at something. Okay? Every position in my life has led me to the next position. And looking back, it's easy to hindsight's 2020. If I would have put every bit of my effort in every one of those positions, understanding that, hey, what I'm doing here, I'm learning. I don't need to compare myself to somebody else. I need to learn what I can learn so that I'm ready for the next position and the next position and the next position, understanding that God has got a path for my life. And if I will only apply myself 100% and not look at what other people are doing and just be the best I can at what I'm doing, whether that's working at Arby's or working at a marketing firm or working as a youth pastor or doing whatever, which was my case, I would understand that, hey, he's preparing me for the next thing. But instead, what we do is we say, why can't I have what he has? Because you're not ready for that.
Or not capable of
Or
that.
not capable of that
It's
yet.
so interesting because it brings up the point that if we covet, and especially if we're talking about talent, skills, those type of things, if we covet that, then what we could be doing in effect is burying or ignoring or not maturing the God-given skills
Yes.
that He has given us, that He has provided.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to me, the design of coveting, when you say if I could get you as the devil, as a demon, as evil, if I could get you to covet and desire something in you that is not God-given, I can distract you and keep you from
Exactly.
the things you were given.
Yep.
And so if we can take covetousness out of our life, we actually can develop the skills that we were intended to develop. We're not all going to preach on Sunday. We're not all going to lead the hospitality team. Maybe we're not the best children's instructor, but what did God design us to do? And could we spend more time exploring and developing that?
Yes. Yeah. One of the best bosses I had always told me, he would say, listen, learning is never done. And he put expectations on me that when you leave the office, I want a book in your hand. I want you to have a book on leadership. I want you to have a book on marketing. I want you to have something that I know you're investing in yourself as you leave this office. Because, yes, your job's done here, but your job for yourself is never done. So you need to always be looking. So many times we can get into a position where we get up, we make our breakfast, we get in the car, we go to our job, and it's a Monday through Friday grind. And instead of saying, you know what, how do I personally make this place better? Like, instead of waiting for someone to tell you what to do, we don't invest in the place enough to say, well, what can I do to make my job more efficient, effective, and better for the people around me? Because we're always looking to say, well, I should be there. Instead of where I'm at, how can I bring something to the table? And I think that's what it taught me. Every time he would say, every time you have a problem, don't ever come into my office without the solution, okay? It may be the dumbest solution in the world, but at least you've thought about it.
Yes, exactly.
And so some of that stuff has to be taught. Some of that, and that's why I like these podcasts, because we just kind of free flow and go through all of this stuff. You and I mean, you have a little bit of notes, but this isn't notes.
Yeah.
But But that is all about looking at your own self. And, I hear a lot of young people are like, well, I need to do this and I need to do this and I need to do this. And I'll say, well, go do it. Who's stopping you? You are. I am. Because I'm waiting for somebody else to do it for me. And it's like, nobody's going to do it for you.
When one of the traditional analysis, I guess you would say, when we were looking to promote people. So whatever the next level is, it could be spiritual, it could be for work, it could be whatever it is that you think you desire, was gap analysis. And literally saying, okay, if you're at this point and you want to move to the next level. So let's use promotion because it's the easiest thing to talk about. The gap would be walking through what skills, talents are needed at the next level. Where are you at currently? So what is the gap and how do you intend to close that gap?
Yeah.
So it's a polishing process. So you can't set at one level and say, I am not going to lift a finger
until I get to that.
Until I get to that level,
Yeah.
you will never arrive.
Yeah.
So the idea of the desire to move forward requires work.
Yeah.
It requires time. It requires commitment to something. And so that's why when we start to talk about coveting, I wish I had.
Yeah.
It's so self-defeating.
It is.
And so I guess time and saddle, time and work. I mean, you have to work for these things.
You do. But here's the thing, and this is the catch-22 in a good way. As you work, you develop. God has created us that way. And that's where I don't think, maybe this younger generation doesn't realize is that it is in the work that the knowledge comes and the development comes. I mean, 150 years ago, it was an apprenticeship. Right? I mean, you worked alongside a master craftsman to develop your craft and develop your trade. You came in every day and you were expecting to learn something new or do something. It was through the work and through the repetition and muscle memory that you basically did this. I heard a pastor say one time, and getting onto ministry, there are 88 keys on the piano. But really, it's a repetition of only 8 keys. That's it.
Okay.
So if you learn those 8 keys, it just repeats up and down the piano. So if you learn how to serve, if you learn how to be kind to people, if you learn how to just be faithful and say, hey, I will be here, and you show up, and I will do this, and you do that. These are repetition and muscle memories that you just learn. And then God says, if you're faithful in the small things, I'll get you faithful in the bigger things. And that's the funny thing. I had a meeting with a bunch of young pastors or young kids in college, and they were all in like the ministry leadership program. And so we're sitting around, and I'm with another pastor in the area, and it's me and him and about eight guys at this table. And they looked at us and they said, profoundly, pastors, what is the one thing I need to learn as a young pastor, a young minister, that will affect me or I will carry with me for the rest of my life in ministry? And I looked at him and I said, you need to learn how to stack and fold chairs and tables.
I love it.
And the other pastor just pointed at me and he said, he's absolutely right, because you will do this for the rest of your life. You need to learn how to set up a room.
I remember when I came back to church, at the end of the day, that my first position that I was given was basically it was greeting people at the door. And the point of that, I was very humbled by the life that I led, which wasn't that great. And coming back to church just to be given any position was one that I realized on the front end, I'm not deserving or worthy of this. However, I will do everything in my power to be the best I can be at this. Now, I remember one time that, we were in upstate New York. The weather can be just horrendous. And there had been a rain that had frozen. And so now we're trying to take care of the parking lot. You're just behind the 8 ball. Church is starting. The ice is still there. And so what we did is we organized and said, we are going to go out and we're going to tell anybody that could have a slipping problem, pull up to the front door, and we are going to skate across that ice, and we are going to hold on to hands, and we're going to move that person to the building.
Yeah.
Now, that sounds like the simplest,
Yeah.
but the response that we got out of that by the older lady that was terrified to walk in this, it brought a level of excellence
Yeah.
to a position that somebody might say, well, this position doesn't really matter that much. On that day, it mattered. And it mattered to every person that you got across that parking lot safely.
Yeah.
And it's that idea that says no matter what position, what I bring to the table, I'm going to attempt to do it in excellence.
Mm-hmm.
And that striving, every position is important.
Yes.
It all matters.
Yeah.
We all can't be doing the sermon on Sundays, but it takes all of us. And I realize, I think intuitively people all understand that concept.
Yeah.
But is everybody striving to be absolutely excellent in the position that they are giving? Or would they rather spend more time coveting the next higher position?
Right.
Be excellent where God put you.
Yeah. There's a card that they give. I for some reason, I love the history of different companies. I love Coca-Cola's history. I love Apple's history. But they have a card that they give every employee that has 10 rules of Apple, or they used to. And number 5 was everyone sweeps. Everyone sweeps. And so that really spoke to me in the church environment where, nothing is not my job. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yep.
I mean, if the paper towels are empty, I mean, this happened Sunday. Beth comes up to me and she's like, paper towels are empty in the thing. I go find paper towels. Yep. If the baptism needs to be filled, that's my job today is to empty the water out of the baptism. Nothing is not my job, and if we lose that same attitude that you had when you walked in and they said, you get to be a greeter. See, we can change the vocabulary and say, I have to be a greeter today.
I have to be a greeter.
Yeah. But if you change that vocabulary to, I get to be a greeter, I get to go change the baptism. I mean, that's my job today, is to empty a baptism. And I'm excited about it. I think it goes back to what David said. I would rather be a doorkeeper in the house of the Lord. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
And all of it's valuable. All of it's. I mean, we baptized 18 people on Sunday, and a form and function of doing that is setting it up and tearing it down.
Yep.
It's all valuable, and so nothing is beneath us. And if we can have that attitude, that counteracts that covetousness, because covetousness gets in our heart and it says, I deserve more than I have. It says, and if you can get the attitude where you're just grateful that God has put you in a position to do anything. Because I was the same way. When I walked back into church, I was just happy to be there. They were filming. I remember this. They were filming the service in the back. That was when we had camcorders on tripods in the back of the thing. Sound was awful. The video was awful. And I'm standing in the back, and the lady that was running the camcorder had to go do something, and she looked at me and she said, can you stand here and monitor it? It's the first time somebody asked me to do something when I was in there. And I looked at her and I said, oh, blank, yeah. And I said, oh, I'm so sorry.
Whoops.
Yeah. She just gave me this look and grinned, and she said, you'll be fine, son.
You're okay.
But I lost that. To be honest with you, I got into the attitude that if I leave, this place will fall apart without me, and the Lord took me out, and He said, "Son, they're doing fine," and it just really corrects your attitude that God wants you to be part of His plan. He wants you, and He desires it, but He doesn't need us. It's like dealing with toddlers when you're trying to paint a room.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
I would be chief among toddlers from time to time.
Yes.
You mentioned that about baptism and the idea that somebody has to fill this.
Yeah.
and somebody has to drain this. And you could look at that, anybody could look at that and say, what kind of menial service this is. Yet, if you go to Facebook right now or Instagram and see the proud videos from the parents that got to see their child baptized,
Yeah.
every effort that went into that changed the life of 18 people
Yeah.
forever. And the only way it could have happened is for that to be filled and that to be drained.
Yeah.
It's an honor,
Oh yeah.
an absolute honor. And we just, I can lose sight of that. I remember one time I was praying, I haven't had a lot of visions before, but I have had a couple. One of them was, again, early on in my return to church, and I was just so passionate that it's like, God, I just want to be with you in heaven. And I made the statement, I could do, and I'll do any job in heaven. I'll even be a doorkeeper.
Yeah.
Okay? So think about my mentality towards
yeah.
that. The vision, all of a sudden, I'm in heaven. These huge doors are there, massive doors. And I grab the handle of one door and I open that door up to see thousands of people that are waiting to come in heaven, and their faces shone like it was amazing to see. And the thought is, son, there is no job that leads to my glory that isn't magnificent.
Yeah.
And it took my breath away.
Yeah.
There's not a job in this church that doesn't lead to his glory.
I'll even humble myself low enough to be a doorkeeper.
That was my mentality. Remember the toddler comment we just had?
Yeah,
That's when I was being too rambunctious.
Yeah,
as
I
normal.
often wonder how many times God closes his eyes and shakes his head slowly at us and just says, "Oh, these are my." I mean, Jesus had to look at his apostles and be like, "These guys."
This is the A-team.
Yeah, I mean, with John and James, the mom, can they sit on your right and left hand in glory?
You know not what you ask.
Yeah, yeah,
So you mentioned one other thing that I wanted to bring up, and I think it's super, super interesting because it talks about our coveting heart produces a multitude of sins. Thoughts become words, words become actions, actions into habits, habits to character, and character to destiny. And I think about this statement, and I think of it as being actually amoral. This can lead to a number of things. I mean, I could use road rage as an example. That the thoughts of it lead to the actions, lead to a failure in your character, and since you continue to wallow in this failed character, you've set your own destiny.
yeah,
Or I can think of it as thoughts on, I need to be closer to God, lead me to the words of prayer that leads me to the action of falling down on my knees, which leads to the habit of connection to God, which changes my character and leads me to an eternal destiny.
yeah,
So many times we find situations that, depending upon which direction you choose, leads to drastically different
yes,
outcomes.
yeah,
So here's another one. Thoughts leading to destiny. So let us, if you will, be critically minded around analyzing our thoughts, our behaviors, our actions, because if you believe in this connection, that thought, if you skip the middle, thought leads to destiny.
yeah,
Then what we're thinking and what we're doing in this very minute, at this very time, has eternal consequences.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a heavy statement.
it is. And I think that's why Paul says, take every thought captive. Now, here's a couple things with that. Number one, that takes discipline because we're not used to stopping those negative thoughts and redirecting that, because those are neural pathways that have been developed over DNA, nature and nurture. You know, if you've had a negative parent or a negative environment as a kid, that sticks with you. And so your first inclination into just about anything and everything, if you've been raised in that negative environment, is negative, because that's what was you were brought up in. You know, you can have somebody that sees the negative in everything.
Sure.
You can. So, as a child of God, you're now a new creation in Christ. There is a discipline that you have to take yourself through, and this is not easy. I mean, it's that repetitive thing that you have to say, I'm taking this thought captive, and I'm going to go in a different direction. Now, so the next step of that is thoughts become words. And where I'd like to encourage the parents is I know there's power in positive thinking and power in positive speaking and those kind of things, but do your absolute best to encourage kids because it sticks. I mean, there are some things that we can say to our kids that are just offhanded, smart aleck comments that we don't really mean anything by it, but it's a wound to a kid, you know? And so if we are constantly thinking and speaking negatively, we're repeating that cycle into another generation, because that you skip the middle becomes destiny. That's how powerful it is, you know? Now, does there need to be discipline? Of course. Does there need to be correction? Of course there does. The Proverbs is all about this. I mean, the Bible is all about correcting children and doing those things. But it says, do not correct your children or lead them to wrath. Like, don't do it to the point where they hate you, you know? There's a way to discipline in love. And one of my mentor pastors a long time ago, he said, the only time I would spank my kids is if they violated the 10 Commandments. Okay, it was a capital punishment. If you lied, if you stole, if you murdered your brother, you know, you're going to get a spanking.
You're going to spank.
You know, but he said I would sit down and talk to them before I would spank them, and he said I never used my hand because I didn't want the hand of love to be associated with the hand of discipline. So we had the paddle. And they hated it. It was called the peacemaker.
Peacemaker. Not peacekeeper, peacemaker.
So he said I would sit down with them and I would have a one-on-one, face-to-face conversation, and this was usually a long conversation, about 10 to 30 minutes. And he said at one point my kids just looked at me and said, "Dad, can you just spank me,
please?
Please just get it over with." Because the correction in love was worse than just the disciplinary action. He was just like, "Can you just spank me and just go on?" You know, I think with the thought process, we can all get into a negative cycle, and it's very hard again to jump those grooves. But the Bible says there is an ability to take every thought captive, and let's take road rage, because our first reaction is that guy cut over on me, didn't use a sig, didn't even see me. How many times have we done that?
Many.
But the grace we want people to show us is not the grace we show others, you know.
Ouch.
Yeah.
You mentioned, you talked about parents and the kids and extracting that from my own life. I was raised in church. And then, so I had a very, very bad church experience. And I think you and I have had that conversation. And I left.
Yeah.
That was it. I was mad at God at that time because of how I thought he treated my mother. So suffice it to say. So I left the church for a long, long time. And then I went back. God called me back. Thank goodness God called me back. And what I found fascinating is when the pastors were doing the sermons, I would listen to Bible stories and I would say, I know that. I've heard that. I know what that means. And the point that I'm trying to make is that I was raised in the right environment. And it brought me up in respect to God and to understand more about him, and it never left me. Even though I walked away for years and years and years, when I came back, it was a situation where my raising came right back to me.
Yeah.
So I love that point that you make about for parents and about how it matters so much
Yeah.
in raising, because it won't leave. I am the poster child for it won't leave them.
And it won't leave them. And that's the amazing thing about what we're doing here in kids ministry. And you might say, well, we hit on these stories of Noah and the ark and Moses and the Ten Commandments and David and Goliath and Daniel and the lion's den, the really, the key points in the Old Testament. But when a kid is raised and steeped in that, and they have a base knowledge, and they walk into the sermon at 12, 13, 14 years old here, and we start a sermon series on Jonah and the whale. Okay, I know who Jonah is. I know he got swallowed by the whale. I know he was spit up on Nineveh. And now let me tell you the deeper meaning, because you have that base knowledge. And now we can build on the foundation that was laid, and that's why it's critical to keep your kids in church and to raise them in a right environment. It's fostering those foundational truths, to say, look, this was a literal, legit story, but now let me show you how it applies to you and how it relates to Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep, I completely agree.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, good. Well, I think Will is hitting the last part of chapter 7, which will be the last chapter or section on sin.
We're going to make it to 8.
We're going to make it to 8. Yeah. Yeah, we will. He'll finish 7, and then I'm going to do a special message for Thanksgiving, which will we'll take just a quick break for that message, and then we'll hit right back up on chapter 8, and we should, God willing, finish chapter 8 by the end of the year, which I think it's going to tie right into Christmas and everything else that's going on. So a lot of exciting things are going on here. I'm very, very grateful and thankful for all that the Lord is doing. Just little things like the guy named George just showing up on second service. I want to get baptized, and just little moments like that are what I think. It's funny when you go 3 months down the road and we're sitting around talking in the lobby and somebody's like, "Hey, do you remember that moment?" It's those little things that build a church into a family. So I love that. Well, thank you for joining us, and thank you, Jason, for stepping in. It's great having a conversation with you as always.
Yeah. Enjoyed it very much. Thank you.
Yeah, awesome. Look forward to seeing you guys on Sunday, 8 o'clock, 9:45, and 11:30, or Wednesday night at 6:30. We'll see you later.